Black woman denied entry to high-end restaurant comes back as guest of honor. But when she takes the stage, Dr. Amara Jackson stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the lapel of her tailored blazer. At 35, she was the youngest person and the first Black woman to become the head of neurosurgery at Boston General Hospital. Her dark skin glowed with quiet confidence, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and determination. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, Amara had always dreamed big. Her parents, both school teachers, instilled in her a deep respect for education and a belief that with hard work and perseverance, she could achieve anything. From an early age, Amara showed an extraordinary aptitude for science and an insatiable curiosity about the human body. Despite facing numerous obstacles, including financial constraints and systemic racism, Amara excelled in her studies. She graduated high school as valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to Harvard, and went on to complete her medical degree and residency with honors. Her groundbreaking research on minimally invasive techniques for treating brain tumors had earned her international recognition in the medical community. However, Amara's professional success hadn't come without personal sacrifices. Her demanding career had left little time for socializing or dating. She'd watched as friends got married and started families, while she poured herself into her work. Recently, she'd begun to feel a gnawing sense of loneliness, a desire for connection beyond the operating room. Tonight was supposed to be different. After months of gentle prodding from her best friend and fellow surgeon, Dr. Lisa Chen, Amara had finally agreed to a blind date. The restaurant La Plume was one of Boston's most exclusive establishments, a place where the city's elite gathered to see and be seen. As Amara gave herself one last appraising look in the mirror, she felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It had been years since she'd been on a proper date, and she couldn't help but wonder if she'd lost her touch. But she reminded herself of all she had accomplished, of the lives she had saved with her skilled hands and brilliant mind. Surely she could handle one dinner date. With a deep breath, Amara grabbed her clutch and headed out the door. The warm summer evening embraced her as she stepped onto the sidewalk, hailing a cab. As the city lights blurred past the window, Amara allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that tonight might be the beginning of something new. A chance to round out her life with the personal fulfillment she'd been missing. Little did she know, the evening ahead would challenge her in ways she never expected, forcing her to confront not just societal prejudices, but her own sense of identity and worth. The gleaming facade of La Plume loomed before Amara as she stepped out of the cab. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through tall windows, and the soft murmur of conversation and clinking glasses drifted out onto the street. Amara smoothed her dress, a stunning royal blue number that hugged her curves, and approached the entrance with confident strides. As she reached for the door, a white-gloved hand appeared, blocking her path. Amara looked up, startled to find a tall, thin man in an impeccable tuxedo regarding her with a cold, appraising stare. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone making it clear that he doubted she belonged there. Amara blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Yes, I have a reservation. The name is Jackson." The maitre d' raised an eyebrow and made a show of consulting his tablet. After an unnecessarily long moment, he looked back at Amara, his expression a mixture of disdain and false regret. "I'm afraid I don't see any reservation under that name. Perhaps you're mistaken about the date or the establishment." The implication was clear, and Amara felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the same tension she'd experienced countless times throughout her career when someone underestimated or dismissed her based on her appearance. She took a deep breath, willing herself to remain calm. "There must be some mistake," she said evenly. "My date made the reservation. Could you please check under the name Robert Caldwell?" The maitre d's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Caldwell is a valued patron of La Plume. I find it unlikely that he would have made a reservation for someone like—" He paused, seemingly searching for a diplomatic way to finish his sentence. "For someone we're not familiar with." Amara's patience was wearing thin. She'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so blatantly. "I assure you, I am Dr. Merbois, Caldwell's dinner companion for this evening. If you'd just call him or check your reservation system again." "I'm sorry, madam," the maitre d' interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension, But Le Plume has a strict dress code and patron guidelines. We cannot accommodate walk-ins, especially those who may not meet our standards. His gaze flicked dismissively over Amara's attire and then back to her face. The insult was unmistakable. Amara felt a hot flush of anger and humiliation rising in her cheeks. She was about to unleash a scathing retort when a commotion from inside the restaurant caught her attention. A group of well-dressed patrons were exiting, laughing loudly and clearly intoxicated. As they stumbled past, one of the women, blonde, petite, and wearing a dress that was far more revealing than Amara's, tripped and nearly fell. Amara instinctively reached out to steady her. "Oh my God, thank you," the woman slurred, giggling. She squinted at Amara, then turned to the maitre d'. "Hey Pierre, why haven't you let this lovely lady in? She just saved me from face-planting on the sidewalk." Pierre, the maitre, looked deeply uncomfortable. "Madam, I was just explaining to this person that we have certain standards." "Standards?" the drunk woman interrupted, her voice rising. "What, like not being black? Because let me tell you, half the people in there right now couldn't tell a salad fork from a soup spoon if their trust funds depended on it." A hush fell over the entrance. Other patrons waiting to enter were now watching the scene unfold with a mixture of discomfort and curiosity. Amara stood frozen, caught between mortification and a growing sense of righteous anger. Just then, a distinguished-looking man in his early 40s emerged from the restaurant, his expression concerned. "Is everything all right out here? I thought I heard." He stopped short when he saw Amara, his eyes widening in recognition. "Dr. Jackson? Amara? I'm Robert Caldwell. I'm so sorry. I got caught up in a work call and lost track of time. I see you've already met our charming gatekeeper, Pierre." The maitre blanched, realizing his grave error. "Mr. Caldwell, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. I was just about to escort Dr. Jackson to your table." Robert's gaze hardened as he looked from Pierre to Amara and back again. "Somehow, I doubt that very much," he said coldly. He turned to Amara, his expression softening. "Dr. Jackson, I cannot apologize enough for this incident. Perhaps we should take our business elsewhere this evening?" Amara stood tall, her mind racing. This was a pivotal moment, and she knew her response would define not just this evening, but perhaps much more. The eyes of everyone around them were fixed on her, waiting to see how she would react. In that instant, Amara made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events she could never have anticipated. As Amara opened her mouth to respond, a sudden commotion from inside the restaurant drew everyone's attention. A tall, elegant black woman in her 60s emerged, her presence commanding instant respect. Amara's eyes widened in recognition. It was Dr. Vivian Carter, a pioneering neurosurgeon who had been Amara's mentor and inspiration throughout medical school. Dr. Carter's gaze swept over the scene, quickly assessing the situation. Her eyes locked with Amara's, and a look of understanding passed between them. Without a word, Dr. Carter strode purposefully towards the group. "Amara, dear, I thought I recognized your voice," Dr. Carter said warmly, embracing her former protege. She turned to face Pierre, her expression cool and evaluating. "I trust there isn't a problem here?" Pierre, already flustered, now looked positively panicked. "Dr. Carter, there seems to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Dr. Carter's voice was sharp. "Perhaps you'd care to explain why one of the country's top neurosurgeons is being denied entry to an establishment where I'm currently hosting a fundraiser for our hospital's new pediatric wing." The revelation hit Amara like a thunderbolt. She had known about the fundraiser. Of course, it had been the talk of the hospital for weeks. But in her preoccupation with her blind date, she had completely forgotten it was tonight. And at Le Plume. Of all places. Robert Caldwell cleared his throat. "Dr. Carter, I'm Robert Caldwell. I had asked Dr. Jackson to dinner this evening, not realizing the fundraiser was happening here. It seems there was some confusion about her reservation." Dr. Carter's eyebrow arched. "Confusion? Is that what we're calling blatant discrimination these days?" She turned back to Amara. "My dear, I'm so sorry you've had to endure this, but perhaps this is an opportunity." Amara felt a familiar surge of admiration for her mentor. Dr. Carter had always had a knack for turning difficult situations into teachable moments. "What do you mean?" Amara asked, intrigued despite her lingering anger and embarrassment. Dr. Carter's eyes sparkled with a mixture of mischief and determination. Well, we have a room full of Boston's most influential citizens in there, all gathered to support our hospital. What better way to drive home the importance of our work in creating a more equitable healthcare system than by sharing this enlightening experience? The implications of Dr. Carter's suggestion began to dawn on Amara. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person of color who had ever been made to feel less than, every brilliant mind overlooked because of the color of their skin. It was about changing minds and opening eyes. Amara straightened her shoulders, a new sense of purpose filling her. Dr. Carter, I think that's an excellent idea, but if we're going to do this, let's do it right. She turned to Robert, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of admiration and concern. Mr. Caldwell, I apologize, but I'm afraid I'll have to take a rain check on our dinner. It seems I have a more pressing engagement this evening. Robert nodded, understanding and respect evident in his eyes. Of course, Dr. Jackson. I look forward to rescheduling, perhaps somewhere more deserving of your presence. As Dr. Carter linked her arm through Amara's and prepared to escort her into the restaurant, Amara felt a profound shift within herself. What had begun as a humiliating experience was transforming into something powerful. A chance to challenge perceptions, break down barriers, and perhaps change lives. With her head held high, Amara stepped past the still sputtering Pierre and into La Plume, ready to turn an act of discrimination into a moment of triumph. As Amara entered La Plume on Dr. Carter's arm, the bustling chatter of the fundraiser momentarily dimmed. Curious glances and raised eyebrows followed their progress through the opulent dining room. Amara felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the weight of being the only black face in a sea of white privilege. But this time, instead of shrinking under the scrutiny, she drew strength from it. Dr. Carter leaned in close, her voice low and encouraging. Remember, Amara, you've earned your place here 1,000 times over. Now, let's make sure they never forget it. With a subtle nod, Amara squared her shoulders and allowed a confident smile to grace her features. As they approached the center of the room, where a small stage had been set up for speeches, Dr. Carter gave her hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Carter's voice rang out, silencing the room. I apologize for the interruption, but I have an important announcement to make. Tonight, we've been reminded of why our work at Boston General is so crucial. Amara watched as the crowd's attention focused on her mentor, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and confusion. You see, Dr. Carter continued, just moments ago, one of our hospital's most brilliant surgeons, a woman who has saved countless lives, was denied entry to this very establishment. Not because of her credentials, which are impeccable, not because of her character, which is beyond reproach, but because of the color of her skin. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Amara could see shock, disbelief, and in some faces a flicker of shame. Dr. Amara Jackson? Dr. Carter gestured for Amara to join her on stage. Would you care to share your experience with our esteemed guests? As Amara made her way to the stage, she felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about her personal humiliation anymore. It was about seizing an opportunity to effect real change. With each step, she made a series of rapid-fire decisions. How much to reveal, how to frame her experience, and most importantly, how to turn this moment into a catalyst for progress. Taking the microphone, Amara gazed out at the sea of faces, many of whom she recognized as patients she had treated, colleagues she had worked alongside, and donors whose contributions had funded her research. Good evening, she began, her voice steady and clear. I hadn't planned on addressing you all tonight. In fact, I was supposed to be on a date. A ripple of nervous laughter coursed through the crowd. Instead, I find myself here, turning a moment of personal indignity into what I hope will be a wake-up call for us all. Over the next few minutes, Amara recounted her experience at the door, not sparing any details but also not allowing bitterness to color her words. She spoke of the countless microaggressions she'd faced throughout her career, the doubts she'd had to overcome, and the perseverance required to reach her current position. But this isn't just about me, Amara continued, her voice gaining strength. It's about every person of color who's been made to feel less than. It's about every brilliant mind we lose because of prejudice and systemic barriers. And most importantly, it's about the patients we serve. Patients who deserve care from the most skilled and diverse team of medical professionals we can assemble. As she spoke, Amara could see the impact of her words rippling through the audience. Some faces showed genuine shock and dismay, others a dawning recognition of their own unconscious biases. And in more than a few, she saw the spark of determination, a desire to do better, to be better. Tonight, we're here to raise funds for a new pediatric wing, Amara concluded. But I challenge us to think bigger. Let's not just build new walls. Let's break down the invisible barriers that keep talented individuals from reaching their full potential. Let's create mentorship programs, scholarships, and initiatives that will ensure the next generation of medical professionals truly represents the diverse community we serve. As Amara finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. It started slowly, tentatively, but quickly grew into a thunderous standing ovation. Dr. Carter embraced her, tears glistening in her eyes. In the moments that followed, Amara found herself surrounded by a whirlwind of activity. Donors approached her, checkbooks in hand, eager to contribute to the initiatives she had proposed. Colleagues offered words of support and commitments to change hiring practices. Even the owner of La Plume, red-faced with embarrassment, came forward to offer a profuse apology and a promise to implement diversity training for all staff. As the night wore on, Amara realized that her decision to speak out had set in motion a chain of events that would have far-reaching consequences. She had turned a moment of personal pain into a powerful catalyst for change. But with this newfound influence came new responsibilities and challenges. As Amara made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and fielding questions, she couldn't help but wonder, what would tomorrow bring? And was she ready for the spotlight that would inevitably follow? As the fundraiser began to wind down, Amara found herself in a quiet corner of the restaurant, finally having a moment to process the whirlwind of events. She was startled out of her reverie by a gentle tap on her shoulder. Turning, she came face to face with Robert Caldwell, her forgotten blind date. "Dr. Jackson," he said, a mixture of admiration and embarrassment in his voice. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for what happened earlier, and I'm in awe of how you handled it." Amara studied him for a moment. Robert was undeniably handsome, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled nervously. In another lifetime, she might have been excited about the prospect of a date with him. Now, however, she felt a strange distance, as if the events of the evening had fundamentally altered her path. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," she replied carefully. "I appreciate your support. I hope you understand why I couldn't join you for dinner as planned." Robert nodded earnestly. Of course. Actually, I was wondering if you might consider rescheduling. Perhaps we could discuss how I might help with some of the initiatives you proposed." Before Amara could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of a striking woman in her early 40s. She had sharp features softened by a warm smile, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. "Excuse me," the woman said, but I couldn't help overhearing. "Dr. Jackson, my name is Vanessa Reeves. I'm a producer for WGBH, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in appearing on our morning show to discuss what happened here tonight." Amara blinked, momentarily overwhelmed. That's very kind of you to offer, Miss Reeves, but I'm not sure if—" "Please, call me Vanessa," the producer interrupted smoothly. "And I understand your hesitation, but your story, your message, it needs to be heard by a wider audience. This could be an opportunity to really make a difference." As Vanessa spoke, Amara noticed Robert's expression change. He seemed to be wrestling with some internal conflict. Finally, he spoke up. "Dr. Jackson, Amara, if I may, I think you should consider it," he said earnestly. "Your words tonight were powerful. They made me realize how much I've taken my own privilege for granted. If you can have that effect on more people." Amara looked between Robert and Vanessa, feeling the weight of the decision before her. On one hand, she was a surgeon, not an activist. Her comfort zone was the operating room, not the television studio. But on the other hand, hadn't she just challenged others to step out of their comfort zones for the greater good? "I'll think about it," Amara said finally. But I'd need to clear it with the hospital first, and I'd want to make sure the focus stays on the bigger issues, not just on my personal experience. Vanessa beamed. Of course. Here's my card. Give me a call tomorrow and we can discuss the details. As Vanessa walked away, Robert turned back to Amara. I know this isn't how either of us expected the evening to go, he said with a rueful smile. But I'm glad I got to see this side of you. You're a remarkable woman, Dr. Jackson. Amara felt a flutter in her chest. Not of romantic attraction, but of something deeper. A sense that she was standing on the precipice of something important, something that could change not just her life, but the lives of many others. As she left La Plume that night, Amara's mind raced with possibilities. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. In the weeks following the incident at La Plume, Amara found herself thrust into a whirlwind of activity. Her appearance on WGBH's morning show had gone viral, sparking a national conversation about racial discrimination in upscale establishments and the broader implications for society. Suddenly, she was fielding requests for interviews, speaking engagements, and even book deals. Through it all, two unexpected relationships began to develop, reshaping Amara's personal and professional life in ways she never anticipated. The first was with Vanessa Reeves, the television producer. What had started as a professional connection quickly evolved into a genuine friendship. Vanessa, with her media savvy and extensive network, became not just Amara's publicist, but also a trusted confidante. You're doing amazing, Amara, Vanessa said one afternoon as they sat in her office, reviewing talking points for an upcoming panel discussion. But how are you really holding up? This can't be easy, being thrust into the spotlight like this. Amara sighed, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. Honestly, some days I feel like I'm drowning. I became a surgeon to save lives, not to be a public figure. But then I think about all the young black girls who might see me and realize they can dream bigger. And it makes it all worth it. Vanessa reached across the desk and squeezed Amara's hand. That's why you're the perfect person for this role. You're authentic, passionate, and you never lose sight of the bigger picture. Just remember, it's okay to take a breather sometimes. You can't pour from an empty cup. The second relationship that blossomed was with Robert Caldwell, though not in the way either of them had initially expected. Their planned romantic date had transformed into a powerful allyship. Robert, deeply affected by the events at La Plume and Amara's subsequent advocacy, had thrown himself into supporting her cause. As the CEO of a successful tech company, Robert had connections and resources that proved invaluable. He used his influence to pressure other businesses to examine their diversity practices and worked with Amara to establish a scholarship fund for underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. One evening, as they were leaving a fundraising event for the scholarship fund, Robert turned to Amara with a serious expression. You know, when I asked you out that night, I thought I was just going to have a nice dinner with a brilliant, beautiful woman. I never imagined it would change my entire worldview. Amara smiled, a mix of emotions playing across her face. Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? I'm grateful for how things turned out, even if it's not what either of us expected. Robert nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. Amara, I hope you know that my feelings for you have only grown stronger through all of this. But I also understand if that's not where your head is right now. Whatever you need, a partner, a friend, an ally, I'm here. Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She reached out and took Robert's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Thank you, Robert. Your support means more to me than I can express. Right now, I think what I need most is a friend, an ally. My life is so complicated at the moment, and I need to focus on this work, but I'm not closing any doors for the future. As they stood there, hands clasped under the starry sky, Amara marveled at how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had gained a fierce friend in Vanessa, a dedicated ally in Robert, and a platform to effect real change. But with these new relationships and opportunities came new pressures and expectations. Amara knew that balancing her surgical career, her newfound activism, and her personal life would be a constant challenge. She would need to navigate the complex dynamics of her relationships with Vanessa and Robert, ensuring that professional boundaries remained clear, even as their personal connections deepened. As she bid Robert goodnight and headed home, Amara felt a mix of excitement and trepidation about what lay ahead. The path she'd embarked on was fraught with challenges, but it also held the promise of profound change, not just for herself, but for countless others who would benefit from her advocacy. With Vanessa's friendship and Robert's support, she felt ready to face whatever came next. 6 months after the La Plume incident, Amara found herself standing backstage at a national medical conference. She had been invited to deliver the keynote address, focusing on the intersection of racial disparities in healthcare and the importance of diversity in the medical profession. It was the largest audience she had ever faced, and the stakes felt impossibly high. As she peeked out at the packed auditorium, Amara's heart raced. In the front row, she could see Vanessa and Robert, both giving her encouraging smiles. But it was the sea of faces behind them that truly took her breath away. A diverse crowd of medical professionals, students, and healthcare administrators, all waiting to hear her speak. Taking a deep breath, Amara stepped out onto the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her, but as her eyes adjusted, she began to speak, her voice strong and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues," she began, "we stand at a crossroads in the history of medicine. For too long, we have allowed systemic biases and institutional racism to compromise the quality of care we provide and limit the potential of brilliant minds in our field." As Amara delved into her speech, weaving personal anecdotes with hard-hitting statistics and calls to action, she could feel the energy in the room shift. People were leaning forward in their seats, nodding, some even wiping away tears. But halfway through her address, just as she was building to her main point, a commotion erupted in the back of the auditorium. A group of protesters had managed to sneak past security, unfurling banners with racist slogans and shouting obscenities. For a moment, Amara froze. The ugly words hurled at her from the back of the room transported her back to that night at La Plume, to every moment in her life when she had been made to feel less than because of her skin color. She felt her confidence wavering, the carefully prepared words slipping away from her. In that crucial moment, Amara's eyes found Robert and Vanessa in the audience. They had both half risen from their seats, looking ready to rush to her defense. But it was the expression on their faces, a mixture of fierce pride and unwavering support, that grounded her. Taking a deep breath, Amara turned to face the protesters directly. In a voice that rang out clearly above their shouts, she said, "Thank you for providing such a clear example of why this conversation is so desperately needed." A hush fell over the room. Even the protesters seemed taken aback by her calm demeanor. "You see," Amara continued, her voice gaining strength, "these individuals believe that their words can diminish me, can diminish us. But they're wrong. Every slur, every act of discrimination, every attempt to hold us back only serves to prove how essential our work is. It reminds us why we must persist, why we must push for change, not just in medicine but in society as a whole." As she spoke, Amara could see security quietly removing the protesters. But more importantly, she could see the effect her words were having on the audience. People were standing up, turning their backs on the protesters and facing her with expressions of solidarity. "We cannot allow fear, ignorance, or hate to dictate the future of healthcare," Amara declared, her voice rising with passion. "We must stand united, not just for ourselves, but for every patient who deserves equitable, compassionate care, regardless of their race, gender, or background." As Amara concluded her speech, the auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. The applause was deafening, drowning out any lingering echoes of the protesters' hateful words. In that moment, facing a sea of colleagues united in purpose, Amara knew that she had turned a potential disaster into a powerful affirmation of her message. The climactic confrontation had not silenced her. It had amplified her voice and strengthened her resolve. As she stood there, bathed in the glow of stage lights and surrounded by the thunderous support of her peers, Amara realized that this was more than just a personal triumph. It was a turning point in her journey as an advocate, a moment that would resonate far beyond the walls of this auditorium. In the wake of the conference incident, Amara found herself at the center of a media storm. Clips of her confrontation with the protesters went viral, sparking intense debates across social media platforms and news outlets. While many praised her poise and eloquence in the face of blatant racism, others criticized her for politicizing a medical conference. The hospital administration, initially supportive of Amara's advocacy work, began to express concerns about the controversy affecting their reputation. Dr. Vivian Carter, who had been Amara's staunchest ally within the institution, called her into a meeting with the board of directors. Dr. Jackson, the chief of surgery, began, his tone carefully neutral. While we applaud your commitment to addressing important issues in healthcare, we're concerned about the attention your recent activities have drawn to the hospital. Amara felt a knot forming in her stomach. She had known this conversation was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. With all due respect, sir, isn't this exactly the kind of attention we should be seeking? We're at the forefront of a crucial conversation about equity in healthcare. Dr. Carter stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. Amara, we're not asking you to stop your advocacy work, but perhaps we need to find a way to address these issues that doesn't put you, and by extension the hospital, in the crosshairs of such volatile public debate. As the meeting continued, it became clear that the board was divided. Some saw Amara's work as a valuable asset, positioning the hospital as a leader in addressing healthcare disparities. Others worried about alienating conservative donors and patients. Leaving the meeting, Amara felt a weight pressing down on her. She had always known that her path wouldn't be easy, but now she faced a difficult choice. Tone down her advocacy to appease the hospital administration, or risk her position and the platform it provided. Seeking advice, Amara reached out to Vanessa and Robert, arranging to meet them at a quiet cafe near the hospital. As she explained the situation, she could see the concern etched on their faces. "They can't silence you, Amara," Vanessa said fiercely. "What you're doing is too important. If Boston General won't support you, we'll find another platform. I have contacts at other hospitals, research institutions." Robert held up a hand, his expression thoughtful. "Wait a minute. Let's not be hasty. Amara, you've built something significant at Boston General. Leaving now could undermine a lot of the progress you've made." Amara sighed, stirring her untouched coffee. "I know, but I can't just stop speaking out. Not when there's so much work left to do." "What if," Robert said slowly, "we could find a way to address the board's concerns without compromising your message? Maybe we need to change the narrative, show them how your advocacy actually benefits the hospital." Vanessa's eyes lit up. "He's right. We need to reframe this. Instead of seeing your work as a liability, we need to show them it's an asset, a way to attract top talent, secure grants for diversity initiatives, improve patient outcomes." As they brainstormed, a plan began to take shape. They would create a comprehensive proposal for the board, outlining how Amara's advocacy work could be integrated into the hospital's broader mission. It would include data on the positive impact of diverse medical teams, testimonials from patients and colleagues, and a strategy for managing public relations. Over the next few weeks, Amara threw herself into preparing the proposal. She reached out to colleagues across the country, gathering statistics and success stories. Robert used his business acumen to help craft a compelling financial argument, showing how embracing diversity and equity initiatives could actually improve the hospital's bottom line. Vanessa, meanwhile, worked her media connections, arranging for positive stories about Boston General's commitment to equity to be featured in several high-profile publications. She also helped Amara refine her public speaking style, finding ways to address controversial topics with diplomacy without diluting her message. The night before she was due to present to the board again, Amara sat in her office, reviewing her notes one last time. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. It was Dr. Carter. "I thought I might find you here," the older woman said, stepping into the room. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" Amara managed a small smile, nervous, but ready. "Dr. Carter, I want you to know how much I appreciate your support through all of this. I know it couldn't have been easy, standing up for me to the board." Dr. Carter waved away her words. "Amara, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for every person of color who's ever been overlooked or underestimated in this field. What you're doing matters. I just hope the board can see that." The next morning, Amara stood before the board once again. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Vanessa and Robert sat in the back of the room, offering silent support. Taking a deep breath, Amara began her presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," she started, her voice clear and confident, "I stand before you today, not just as a surgeon, but as someone who believes in the power of this institution to lead the way in creating a more equitable healthcare system. What I'm proposing isn't just about me or my advocacy work. It's about positioning Boston General at the forefront of a crucial movement in medicine." For the next hour, Amara laid out her vision. She presented data showing how diverse medical teams led to better patient outcomes. She shared stories of young doctors and medical students inspired by her work to choose Boston General for their residencies. And she outlined a comprehensive plan for how the hospital could integrate diversity and equity initiatives into every aspect of its operations, from hiring practices to patient care protocols. As she concluded her presentation, Amara could see the shift in the room. Even the most skeptical board members seemed engaged, asking thoughtful questions and nodding along with her responses. When the chief of surgery finally spoke, his tone was markedly different from their last meeting. "Dr. Jackson," he said, a note of admiration in his voice, "I think I speak for all of us when I say that you've given us a lot to think about. Your passion is undeniable, and the potential benefits to the hospital are clear. We'll need some time to review your proposal in detail, but I believe we may have been hasty in our earlier concerns." As Amara left the boardroom, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She hadn't won yet, but she had opened a door. She had shown that her advocacy work wasn't a liability, but an opportunity for the hospital to lead in addressing one of the most pressing issues in modern healthcare. Outside, Vanessa and Robert were waiting for her. "Well?" Vanessa asked, barely containing her excitement. "How did it go?" Amara allowed herself a small smile. "It's not over yet," she said cautiously. "But I think we've made a breakthrough." As they walked out of the hospital together, discussing next steps and potential outcomes, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced one of her biggest challenges yet and had emerged stronger, more determined than ever to continue her fight for equity in medicine. 2 weeks after her presentation to the board, Amara received the news she had been anxiously awaiting. Not only had the board approved her proposal, but they had gone a step further. They wanted to establish a new Center for Equity in Medicine at Boston General, with Amara as its inaugural director. The decision marked a significant turning point in Amara's career and in the hospital's approach to addressing healthcare disparities. It was an opportunity to institutionalize the changes she had been advocating for, to create lasting impact beyond her individual efforts. As Amara sat in her office, reviewing the board's official statement, she felt a mix of elation and trepidation. This was everything she had hoped for, but it also represented a new set of challenges. Running a center would require a different skill set than performing surgery or giving speeches. She would need to build a team, secure funding, and navigate the complex world of institutional politics. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Robert, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Congratulations, Director Jackson," he said with a warm smile. "I thought this called for a celebration." Amara accepted the flowers, her mind still reeling from the news. "It's incredible, Robert, but I have to admit I'm a little overwhelmed. This is bigger than anything I've taken on before." Robert nodded understandingly. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed, but remember, you're not in this alone. You have a whole network of people ready to support you." As if on cue, Vanessa burst into the office, her face alight with excitement. "Amara, I just heard the news. This is huge. We need to start planning your media strategy right away. This could be a game changer for healthcare equity nationwide." Looking at her two friends, Amara felt a surge of gratitude and determination. Yes, the path ahead would be challenging, but she had allies who believed in her vision. More importantly, she had a platform to effect real systemic change. "You're right," Amara said, standing up. "This is bigger than me. It's about creating a model that other hospitals can follow, about changing the face of medicine itself. We have work to do." As the three of them began to brainstorm ideas for the new center, Amara could feel the energy in the room building. This wasn't just a new job or a new title. It was the beginning of a new chapter in her life's work, a chance to transform her personal triumph into institutional change. The journey that had begun with a moment of discrimination at a restaurant door was now opening doors for countless others. A year after the establishment of the Center for Equity in Medicine, Amara found herself back at La Plume. This time, however, she wasn't there for a date or a fundraiser. She had been invited as the guest of honor at a gala celebrating the restaurant's commitment to diversity and inclusion, a commitment that had been born out of the very incident that had once left her standing outside its doors. As Amara stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, all attentive, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "A year ago," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I stood outside these doors, facing discrimination that was all too familiar. Today, I stand inside, not just as a guest, but as a partner in change." This transformation from exclusion to celebration is a powerful reminder of what we can achieve when we confront our biases and commit to doing better. As she spoke, Amara's mind drifted back over the challenges and triumphs of the past year. Building the Center for Equity in Medicine had been no easy task. There had been resistance from some quarters, skepticism from others. She had faced moments of self-doubt, wondering if she was the right person to lead such an ambitious initiative. But with each obstacle, Amara had grown stronger, more resilient. She had learned to navigate the complex world of institutional politics without compromising her principles. She had become adept at building coalitions, finding common ground with unlikely allies, and perhaps most importantly, she had learned to balance her passion for advocacy with the pragmatism needed to effect real, lasting change. "The journey we've embarked on is far from over," Amara continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But looking around this room, seeing the diversity represented here, I am filled with hope. We've shown that change is possible, that we can create spaces, whether in restaurants or in hospitals, that truly welcome and value everyone." As she concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Amara caught sight of Vanessa and Robert in the audience. Vanessa, who had become not just a friend but a trusted advisor, helping Amara navigate the world of media and public relations, and Robert, whose unwavering support and business acumen had been invaluable in establishing the center. Later, as the three of them shared a quiet moment away from the bustle of the gala, Amara felt a deep sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done any of this without you two," she said softly. "You believed in me, in this cause, even when I wasn't sure I believed in myself." Vanessa squeezed her hand. "You've always had this in you, Amara. We just helped you show the world what we already knew." Robert nodded in agreement. "And in the process, you've changed us too. You've opened our eyes, challenged us to be better. That's the mark of a true leader." Amara felt a lump form in her throat at their words. She had come so far from that night a year ago, from feeling powerless in the face of discrimination to leading a movement for change. But she knew that her growth, her journey, was far from over. As they rejoined the gala, Amara's mind was already racing with new ideas, new challenges to tackle. The Center for Equity in Medicine was just the beginning. There was still so much work to be done, so many lives to touch, so many systems to change. But now, looking out at the diverse crowd mingling in a space that had once excluded her, Amara felt ready for whatever lay ahead. She had found her voice, her purpose, and her power, and she was determined to use them to open doors for others, just as doors had opened for her. As the gala wound down, Amara found herself standing once again at the entrance of La Plume. This time, however, she wasn't outside looking in, but inside looking out at the city lights of Boston. The symbolism of the moment wasn't lost on her. "Dr. Jackson," a voice called softly. Amara turned to see a young black woman, barely out of her teens, approaching hesitantly. I just wanted to thank you. I'm a pre-med student at Boston University, and hearing your story, it gave me hope. It made me believe that I could make it in this field, despite the obstacles." Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest. This, she realized, was why she had fought so hard, why she continued to push for change. It wasn't just about her own experiences, or even about changing policies. It was about inspiring the next generation, about creating a world where young people like this student could dream big without fear of discrimination holding them back. "Thank you," Amara said, reaching out to squeeze the young woman's hand. "Remember, every challenge you face, every barrier you break through, you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for everyone who comes after you." As the student walked away, visibly moved, Amara turned back to the city lights. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that night of humiliation to this evening of celebration. It hadn't been easy, and there was still so much work to do. But looking at the hope in that young student's eyes, Amara knew that every struggle had been worth it. She had turned a moment of exclusion into a movement for inclusion, a personal slight into a catalyst for systemic change. And in doing so, she had not only transformed herself, but had begun to transform the world around her. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest triumphs can emerge from our deepest challenges, if we have the courage to stand up, speak out, and fight for what's right.